She came for the $224,000, my mother said, holding a sweating plastic cup of lemonade in the church fellowship hall, and 32 relatives went quiet. That was the sentence she chose at my grandmother's funeral repast, after my parents had already filed a false missing persons report about me, frozen my inheritance distribution, and let police show up at my apartment and my job like I was unstable or dangerous. They were trying to separate me from $224,000 my grandmother had left me, and they picked a lie with a paper trail. Then a county dispatcher I had never met walked into a room full of my family and read one sentence aloud, and my mother's lawyer closed his folder. My name is Megan Elizabeth Rowan. I am 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Springfield, Missouri on Saturday, March 16th, 2024. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My grandmother, June Whitaker, died on a Wednesday morning at 8:12. March 6th, Cox South Hospital, room 514. It had rained most of the night, and the parking lot smelled like wet asphalt and those white hospital hand soaps that never quite leave your skin. She was 81, colon cancer. She had known exactly what was happening for months, and because she had been the only honest adult in my family for most of my life, she handled even her own dying like paperwork. She had a binder. Navy blue, half-inch tabs, my grandmother's handwriting in black felt tip marker. Insurance, church, burial, house, accounts, grandchildren. She liked things labeled, she liked straight stacks and paid bills and people who answered questions directly. She had worked for 26 years in the Greene County Assessor's office, and she trusted paper more than she trusted anyone, including her own daughter. My mother, Dana Whitaker Rowan, had spent most of my childhood pretending her mother was difficult. My father, Paul Michael Rowan, called her particular in that indulgent voice men use when a woman has standards they do not intend to meet. But my grandmother and I understood each other. She taught me how to compare signatures, how to read bank statements line by line, how to keep copies. She was the one who told me, when I was 16 and my mother had taken money from the coffee can where I kept waitressing tips, "You do not need to scream to know a thing is wrong." I remembered that later. At the hospital after she died, my mother cried exactly twice. Once when the nurse came in with the sympathy packet. Once when the funeral home director asked which casket. My father kept one hand on her shoulder and watched everything else in the room. That is the kind of grief I know now. Not the broken kind. The inventory kind. I was there because I had been there the night before, too. I had sat with my grandmother from 7:30 until after midnight while she drifted in and out and asked for crushed ice, and told me very clearly that the envelope in the second pocket of the binder was for me if Dana starts performing. That was her word, performing. The envelope held a copy of the page naming me as the beneficiary of 2 CDs and 1 brokerage account totaling $224,000 and some change. The exact amount on the statement dated February 28th was $224,318.41. The account was at Mid-Missouri Trust and Savings on East Sunshine. The CDs were set to transfer directly to me on death. The brokerage funds required a distribution instruction form and proof of death. Take pictures of everything my grandmother had said. So I did. I took 16 photos in that hospital room, the binder, the statement, the beneficiary page with my name, Megan Elizabeth Rowan, typed cleanly next to my social security number, except for the last 4 digits, the funeral instruction sheet, the list of hymn choices, the yellow legal pad with the name of her estate lawyer, Gerald Finch, underlined twice. My mother saw me taking the pictures and smiled in that calm way of hers that always made other people think she was the reasonable one. "That is fine," she said, "as long as you remember that grief makes people confused." I said, "I'm not confused." She looked at me for 1 second too long. "We'll see." Those were not dramatic words at the time. They landed later. The funeral was the following Tuesday at First Baptist on South Avenue. 11 in the morning, 57 people signed the guest book. I know because I checked after everyone left. There were grocery store roses near the pulpit and that heavy sweet smell of lilies that makes everything feel more final than it already is. My father stood near the side door greeting people like he was hosting a retirement banquet. My mother wore navy, not black. She always thought black was theatrical. The repast was downstairs in the fellowship hall. Ham sliders, baked beans, potato salad, weak coffee, lemonade in clear plastic cups. The church kitchen always smelled like bleach, canned green beans, and old percolator coffee, and for some reason that smell is now permanently attached to the moment my mother tried to erase me in front of everyone. I had just set down a Pyrex dish of baked ziti I had brought from my apartment when Aunt Colleen asked me, quietly, whether I knew anything about the transfer issue. I said I knew my grandmother had left me something directly, and that Gerald Finch would handle it. My mother heard that from 3 folding tables away. She came for the $224,000, she said. Not loudly, clearly. Then she turned to face the room. I think everyone should understand why Megan has suddenly become so visible. There was a clink of ice against plastic. Someone set down a fork. 32 relatives, church friends, and neighbors turned in my direction at once. I can still tell you who was where. My cousin Leah by the crock pot, Deacon Perry at the coffee urn, Mrs. Nettles from choir near the stack of foam plates, my father by the coat rack saying nothing. I said, "That isn't true." My mother smiled. "Do not make a scene at your grandmother's funeral." That line was for the room. It always was. Then she added, "You disappeared for days, Megan. We had to report you missing. We had no idea what state you were in. Gerald is trying to protect the estate." I had not disappeared. I had been at work on Thursday and Friday, at my apartment Friday night, and at the funeral home on Monday afternoon signing flower cards. I had text records, work logs, a debit card receipt from Hy-Vee on East Battlefield at 6:19 on Friday night, and a Ring camera clip from my downstairs neighbor showing me carrying in cat litter at 7:04. But that was the first time I understood the size of it. They had not just been gossiping, they had called the police and used that report to tell the estate lawyer I was unstable and missing and should not receive funds. In one sentence, in front of people with paper plates and funeral cake, my mother folded me into a version of myself she had been trying to sell for years. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up my purse, took out my phone, and typed the date into notes. March 12th. First Baptist Fellowship Hall, Mom says they filed missing persons report. Witnesses 30 plus. That is how I fight when I know the floor has shifted. I document. If you have ever had one of those moments where your body goes cold before your mind catches up, you know exactly what I mean. You realize the conversation you thought you were having is not the conversation happening. Someone else has been building a file on you in a room you did not know existed. Stay with me, because the next 48 hours were when I learned how carefully my parents had set this up. My grandmother's lawyer, Gerald Finch, was 71, wore hearing aids the color of his skin, and had an office above a travel agency on South National. He smelled like peppermint and old paper. His receptionist, Terry, had acrylic nails and a pale mauve and a habit of lowering her voice when things got uncomfortable. I called at 8:11 the next morning. "I need to know what my mother meant when she said you were trying to protect the estate from me," I said. Gerald asked me to come in. By 10:30, I was in his office with a legal pad in front of me and my grandmother's copied beneficiary page in a clear plastic sleeve. Gerald closed the door and sat down slower than usual. That told me a lot before he even spoke. "Megan," he said, "your parents contacted me on Friday the 8th and said they were unable to locate you. They were concerned for your safety and your capacity. They asked that I delay any direct distributions until things were clarified." "Capacity," I repeated. He did not meet my eyes for a second. "Your mother said there had been episodes." "There have never been episodes." He folded his hands. "I understand that now. At the time, I was told there was an active missing persons report and a welfare concern." "Can I see it?" He hesitated. "I was not sent the full report. I was sent a summary by email and then a faxed cover sheet from your father's office." My father was the volunteer bookkeeper at their church and did payroll 3 afternoons a week for a small HVAC company on West Chestnut. He had access to fax machines, scanners, and people who confused neatness with honesty. Gerald slid a manila folder toward me. Inside was a 2-page typed note signed by my mother and a fax cover sheet with my father's name, Paul Rowan, in the header. The note said I had become paranoid after my grandmother's decline, that I had been talking irrationally about accounts, and that the family believed I might be a danger to myself if given sudden access to substantial funds. There was no doctor's name. No dates attached to any claim. Just phrases: concern, instability, erratic, vulnerable. It was written in the language people use when they want institutions to do their cruelty for them. Did you talk to me before you held anything? I asked. Gerald winced. No. That was answer enough. I asked him very plainly whether any money had actually moved. He said the direct transfer on the brokerage side had been flagged and paused pending confirmation of my status, and the two CDs had not yet been released. If everything went the way my grandmother intended, the full amount coming to me after final reconciliation would be $224,318.41. But while a question sat over me, none of it would be distributed. My rent was $1,320 a month. I had $3,800 in savings. I had student loan payments starting again in May. $224,000 was not just money. It was a condo down payment. No more panic every time the check engine light came on in my 2014 Honda Civic. No more pretending I could save for dental hygiene school while working front desk at a pediatric dental office and covering half my younger cousin's grocery costs after she got kicked out. It was a future with edges, and my parents were trying to turn me into a missing person to get between me and it. I left Gerald's office with copies of everything he would give me and went straight to the Springfield Police Department records window on Chestnut Expressway. The lobby smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. A television in the corner was playing a weather loop no one watched. I asked for any report involving my name filed between March 7th and March 12th. The records clerk, a woman named Cynthia Velez with silver glasses and a sunflower pin, asked for my ID and typed for a while. Then she looked up. There is a welfare-related missing persons entry from March 8th, 12:14 p.m. requested by Dana Rowan, cleared that same evening. I felt something in my chest drop and harden at the same time. Cleared how? She clicked again. Officer contact made at your residence. Subject verified safe. No indicators of impairment. Entry closed at 8:42 p.m., I said. Can I get that? You can request the incident report and the call summary. Body camera usually takes longer. I filled out the request form at a molded plastic table bolted to the floor. My handwriting looked very neat. People think shaking makes handwriting messy. Sometimes it makes it perfect. When I got back to my car, I sat with the engine off and counted my breathing for almost 2 minutes. Then I called my friend Nora Bell. Nora had been my friend since 10th grade biology and was now in her second year at Missouri State Law School. She was not my lawyer. I need to say that clearly. She was my friend with an excellent memory and no sentimental attachment to my family. I read her the wording from the faxed note. She said they are trying to make you too risky to pay. Can they do that? They can say anything. The question is whether they can keep saying it once you start pulling records. I drove to my apartment on South Fremont and built a folder on my kitchen table. Red accordion file from Target, blue sticky notes, one legal pad, one pack of clear sleeves. I labeled sections: police, Gerald, bank, work, witnesses, funeral, photos, texts, timeline. I had been keeping that folder for 11 months by the time it was over. That afternoon, I started with the easiest proof. I printed my time card from Little Smiles Pediatric Dentistry showing I had clocked in at 8:58 a.m. and clocked out at 5:06 p.m. on Thursday, March 7th, and worked half-day Friday, March 8th from 8:55 to 12:01. Dr. Melissa Chow, the practice owner, signed the printout without asking questions. Then she did ask one. Why did a police officer call here Friday asking if you had seen your receptionist? I stared at her. He called at 1:37, she said. I told him you had just left after your shift. That gave me a time. 1:37. I wrote it down. Officer called Dr. Chow at 1:37 p.m. Friday. Confirms I worked until 12:01. Then I asked if she would email me the office door camera clip of me leaving in my green scrub top and black cardigan. She forwarded it before I made it to my car. That night I sent myself screenshots of my location history, my grocery receipt, my utility app showing I had logged in from home Wi-Fi Friday evening, and the text thread with my downstairs neighbor Janice at 7:10 p.m. Janice had written, "You left your trunk open again, LOL." I had replied with a photo of the trunk shut, a missing person, apparently. Now let me take you back to Friday, March 8th, because that was the day the lie began. In a form I could measure. I know this because I got the dispatch summary 4 business days later. Dispatch event number 24068143. Complaint type: missing adult, welfare concern. Reporting party: Dana Rowan. Location given: my apartment address on South Fremont, Unit B. Her statement said she had not heard from me in 4 days, that I had been emotionally deteriorating over family finances, and that she feared I had taken off in my Honda Civic, possibly with documents belonging to the family. That phrase mattered: documents belonging to the family. My grandmother had died less than 48 hours earlier. The only documents anyone was worried about were the account papers. According to the log, my mother called at 2:14 p.m. from her cell phone. The call lasted 6 minutes and 11 seconds. She gave my plate number correctly. She gave my date of birth correctly. She said I had been fixated on inheritance issues and not sleeping. She did not mention that I had been at work that morning. She did not mention I had answered a text from her at 10:22 with, "At work, we'll call later." I still have that text. At 3:02, dispatch entered a note that my father, Paul Rowan, called back to add that I might be carrying estate documents and financial records not belonging to her. Not belonging to her. I printed that line in 14-point font and highlighted it yellow, because when someone is trying to tell the world you are confused, exact wording becomes holy. The officer who came to my apartment was Officer Trevor Sykes. He knocked at 8:27 p.m. while I was in mismatched socks heating leftover ziti and watching a home renovation show with the captions on. My apartment smelled like tomato sauce, litter dust, and the cinnamon candle my cousin left burning too long the previous week. My cat Olive ran under the couch when he knocked. When I opened the door, he was polite. "Are you Megan Rowan?" "Yes. Your family reported concern for your safety. I just need to confirm you're okay." I remember thinking the whole thing was annoying but not serious. I told him I was fine. I told him my parents and I were not close, and that family money was probably involved. He made a face that told me he had already guessed as much. He asked if I wanted medical help. I said no. He asked if I knew my family had reported me missing. I said, apparently they like drama. He gave a small half smile. Then he looked around, saw my work badge on the counter and the pasta on the stove, and said, "All right, I'll clear it." That should have been the end of it. Instead, my parents used the existence of the report itself as a weapon. Not the result, the filing. By the time Officer Sykes closed the entry at 8:42 p.m., my mother had already called 2 aunts, my cousin Leah and Gerald Finch. On Saturday morning, she called my landlord, Roy Timmons, who owned 6 duplexes and had known my parents through church for years. She told him the police had been looking for me and she was worried I might spiral and stop paying rent. Roy called me at 9:15 while I was in the cereal aisle at Walmart Neighborhood Market. "Everything okay over there?" he asked, too casually. "Yes. Your mom said there had been some sort of episode." There it was again, episode. A word with no body. Just enough shape to get institutions to lean away from you. I said my mother filed a false report because of inheritance money. I have proof I was at work. Roy got very quiet. Then he said, "Well, keep me updated." He did not apologize. Men like Roy never apologize for listening to the wrong person. They just back away slowly and hope you let them. Monday morning, my cousin Leah called me from the church parking lot. Leah was 31, had 2 boys under 8, and had spent most of our lives surviving by staying agreeable. She was the person in every family who knows what happened but says nothing because silence has kept the lights on. Her voice was low. "I need to tell you something," she said. Uncle Paul was in the kitchen after the repast with a packet from Gerald's office. "He told your mom, if we can get the release delayed, we can force supervision on the account." I stopped at the red light on Campbell and Battlefield and put the car in park. "Did anyone else hear that?" Mrs. Nettles was by the tea urn. I do not know if she understood. "Why are you telling me now?" A long pause. "Because I have a daughter, and because your grandmother would hate me if I let this keep going. That is one of the only clean things anyone in my family did for me in those months." She had known something and stayed silent for 3 days. Then she didn't. If you have ever been the person everyone expects to absorb the lie quietly, you know how shocking it is when one witness finally chooses discomfort over loyalty. It does not fix the damage, it changes the weather. And what Leah told me gave me a new question to ask. not whether my parents were lying. I already knew that. The question was what exactly they were trying to do with the delay. I called Gerald again. This time I asked him directly whether anyone had asked him to place conditions on my inheritance. He sighed before answering. Your parents suggested that because of your age and what they described as emotional instability, the funds might be better dispersed with family assistance. Whose family assistance? He was quiet. Theirs, I said. Did they put that in writing? Another pause. Not in those words. I wrote that down too. By Wednesday, March 20th, I had the incident report from police records, 4 pages. Officer Sykes's narrative was short and clean. Contact made with Megan Rowan at residence. Subject coherent, oriented, employed, no visible distress beyond annoyance at false report. Subject advised reporting family conflict regarding inheritance. No basis for continued missing persons status. I read that line 4 times. No basis. Then, 2 days later, I got the body camera summary request approved and learned there was audio available by appointment at the records office. Not the full video copy yet, just supervised review. I took Nora with me. The audio room was small and too cold. The keyboard clicked loudly when the clerk loaded the file. Officer Sykes's voice came through tinny but clear. Then mine. Irritated. Tired. Entirely normal. Do I look missing? I asked him in the recording. You'd be surprised what I get sent to, he said. Nora wrote down the timestamp. 8:29 p.m. at 8:31, I said. My parents are trying to interfere with my grandmother's estate. That mattered because it proved what the issue was on the very night of the report, not later after I had time to craft a story. Then, in the moment. When we left the building, Nora stood by the handrail in the parking lot and said, You need the call itself. Can I get that? Maybe not easily, but dispatch logs. Yes. And if they ever repeat the lie in a room where the wrong person can hear it, you want the audio ready. The wrong person. That phrase stayed with me. At home that evening, I made a timeline on 3 sheets of taped together printer paper and spread it across my living room rug. March 6th, my grandmother dies. March 7th, I work all day. March 8th, I work half day, 10:22 a.m. Text from mom answered. 12:14 p.m. Missing persons entry opened. 1:37 p.m. Officer calls my job. 2:14 p.m. Mom's dispatch call. 3:02 p.m. Dad adds documents note. 7:04 p.m. Neighbor text. 8:27 p.m. Officer at my door. 8:42 p.m. Report cleared. Once it was laid out in order, the whole thing became obscene. My mother had told police she had not heard from me in 4 days, on a day when I had answered her text 4 hours earlier. That is how long it took their story to stop making sense. 4 hours, I did not go to their house. I did not send a long message. Instead, I got quieter. I called Mid-Missouri Trust and asked what exactly was needed to release the funds. The trust officer, a woman named Beth Harland with a soft Ozark accent and a surprisingly blunt manner, said they needed confirmation that there was no active law enforcement concern and a clean instruction packet consistent with the beneficiary designation. She would not discuss family allegations, she would discuss records. I like records, I said. I can tell, she replied. On Monday, March 25th, I took Beth a binder, not my grandmother's, mine gray, 1-inch ring, cover page with my name and contact information. Tab 1, beneficiary statement. Tab 2, death certificate. Tab 3, police incident report showing report cleared same day. Tab 4, time card and work camera stills. Tab 5, text screenshots with dates. Tab 6, witness note from Leah, signed and dated in blue ink. Tab 7, timeline. Beth flipped through it slowly, then stopped at the dispatch summary. Who gave this phrase? She asked, pointing to documents belonging to the family. My father. She made a note. I am not saying what this means, she said, which meant she absolutely was saying something by not saying it. I am saying this packet is more organized than most probate submissions I see from men twice your age. I almost laughed. I did not. I just said thank you. As I stood to leave, she said, Megan, if anyone asks you for control of these funds because they are worried about your judgment, do not agree verbally to anything. Ask them to put every suggestion in writing. That was advice, real advice. The kind women pass to each other when they recognize a pattern and know better than to name it too early. I followed it exactly. 3 days later, my father called and left a voicemail at 7:12 p.m. I still know the timing because I saved all 14 voicemails he left over the next month in a folder called Paul. The first one said, Megan, Your mother and I are trying to protect you from making a rash decision. We think a supervised arrangement for the inheritance would be wise. Please be mature, please be mature. People who are stealing from you love that phrase. I transcribed the voicemail and sent a text back. If you have any proposal, send it in writing. He did not text, my mother did. At 9:06 p.m. she wrote, Gerald agrees your funds should be handled carefully. You are young, we can discuss a family-managed account. I took a screenshot immediately. Then one showing the timestamp. Then one with her contact info visible. I replied, send any proposal in writing. She sent, you are proving our concern. I did not answer. Now let me take you back to Thursday, April 4th at 6:40 p.m. because that was the night they finally put theft into writing. The email came from my father's personal Gmail, subject line draft stewardship plan. He attached a 2-page document called Family Support Structure PDF. It said in his language, but clearly with my mother's emotional fingerprints all over it, that due to my recent disappearance and instability around funeral events, they proposed that any inheritance funds be placed in an account requiring dual approval from me and one parent for withdrawals over $5,000 during an 18-month adjustment period. Dual approval for my money. There was also a line saying that because some estate documents had gone missing after the funeral repast, they believed temporary oversight was necessary to preserve family assets. That was the moment I saw the whole shape of it. The missing persons report was not random humiliation. It was the first step in creating a record that I was unreliable with money and paperwork so they could wedge themselves between me and the transfer. I forwarded the email to Nora, Beth, and Gerald. Nora called in under a minute. Do not respond emotionally. I'm not emotional. I know, that is why I said it. This is good. This is them getting sloppy. Beth replied the next morning with one sentence. Please bring a copy of this to my office. Gerald called at 9:30 and sounded tired in a way I had not heard before. I want to be clear, he said. I did not agree to this arrangement. My mother said you did? I know what she said. Then, after a pause that told me he was choosing his words carefully, he added, Megan, if this matter is discussed publicly again, I would prefer that any conclusions come from records custodians, not family argument. There it was again. The wrong person in the room. The person outside the family whose voice would matter more than mine because they had no emotional investment in me winning. My parents, meanwhile, kept escalating socially. My mother told Aunt Colleen that I had frightened the officer who found me, not true. She told Deacon Perry that my grandmother had worried about me getting into money trouble for years. Also not true. My father called my younger brother, Evan, and said I was trying to strip the family before funeral expenses were even settled. Evan was 22, worked at an auto parts store in Nixa, and had never once asked where our grandmother's money was actually going. He texted me, just don't do anything crazy. I did not answer. The only ally my parents had who really mattered was my Aunt Denise. Technically my mother's cousin, but she had inserted herself into every family conflict since I was 12, and always with that same glossy, pitying tone. She called me on Sunday, April 7th at 4:16 while I was changing my sheets. Your mother is under extraordinary strain, she said. Is she? She filed that report because she thought you were unsafe. She texted me 4 hours before she called it in. Silence. Then Denise switched tactics. You are young. $224,000 is not something you should handle alone. That sentence clarified everything in a way even the false report had not. They did not just want control, they believed they were entitled to it. I said, I'm hanging up now. Megan, be careful. Once reputations harden, they are hard to reverse. That was supposed to scare me. It did, but not in the way she intended. It made me move faster. If you have ever had someone warn you about your reputation when they are the one damaging it, you know how surreal that feels. They want you to treat the smoke as weather, not arson. But by then, I had enough paperwork to stop feeling crazy and start feeling methodical. And methodical is not a mood. It is a weapon. On Tuesday, April 9th, Beth Harland called me into Mid-Missouri Trust for a meeting at 2 p.m. Her office smelled like toner and lemon furniture polish. She had my binder open and my father's stewardship draft beside it. Our compliance team has reviewed the file, she said. There will be no family co-control placed on funds designated to you unless you request it in person, which I assume you are not doing. I am not, she nodded. There is also concern here about false statements made to interfere with transfer. That was the closest anyone had come to saying the truth out loud. She slid a form toward me to confirm direct distribution instructions. I signed in black ink. My hand was steady. How long? I asked. Assuming no new issue appears, 2 to 3 weeks. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in a month. Then Beth said one more thing. If your parents continue citing law enforcement contact, you may want the original dispatch audio. People are very brave with summaries, less so with recordings, so I asked for it. The actual audio took time. Forms, waiting, follow-ups, one clerk out sick, another asking me to narrow the date range even though I had already done that twice. But on Friday, April 26th, I got notice that the call could be released in redacted form because it was closed and involved me. I picked up a CD at the records office like it was 2006. White paper sleeve, my name written in blue ink. Dispatch audio, March 8th, 2024. At home, I put it in my old laptop because it was the only device I still owned with a disk drive. The audio had static and keyboard clicks and my mother's voice sounding breathless in that practiced way she used when she wanted to sound frightened but in control. I have not heard from my daughter in 4 days, she said. Then the dispatcher asked whether there had been any contact at all. My mother answered no, none. I sat on my kitchen floor and played that part 5 times. No, none. 10:22 a.m. same day, I had texted her back from work. At 12:51 p.m., I was on church security footage carrying baked ziti into the fellowship hall. At 1:37, my boss told Officer Sykes I had just left work. At 2:14, my mother said she had no contact for 4 days, a lie with timestamps on all sides. I copied the audio file 3 times, one to a flash drive on my keychain, one to cloud storage, one to a folder I shared with Nora. Then I printed the transcript and highlighted no none. I was not interested in revenge yet. Not the cinematic kind. I wanted containment. I wanted the money released, the lie pinned down, and my name put back where it belonged. But revenge and containment are cousins. Once the truth is organized enough, it starts acting on its own. The money hit my account on Wednesday, May 1st at 9:18 a.m. 2 deposits from the CDs and one wire from the brokerage distribution, total after final adjustments, funeral allocation, and accrued interest was $224,602.13. More than the February statement because of timing. Less than life-changing for some people. Absolutely life-changing for me. I was in my Civic at the stoplight by Glenstone and Sunshine when the alert came through. I pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall next to a vape store and a tax prep place and cried for exactly 41 seconds. Then I wiped my face, took screenshots, and called Beth to say thank you. I did not tell my parents, but they found out anyway because people who try to control your money can always tell when they have lost access to it. My father left 3 voicemails that day. My mother left one at 6:54 p.m. I understand you forced the transfer through, she said. That was reckless. Forced the transfer through, like I had broken into a vault and stolen from myself. I saved the voicemail. Then summer arrived, and with it came the family event they assumed I would skip. My cousin Leah's daughter Harper was being baptized on Sunday, June 9th, back at First Baptist, same building, same basement fellowship hall for the lunch after. Ham again, white cake this time, sweet tea, buttercream, and percolator coffee. Leah called me the week before and said, "If you come, do not sit alone." So I sat with Leah, Mrs. Nettles from choir, and my grandmother's friend Barbara Klein, who had worked with her at the assessor's office for 15 years and still wore Chanel No. 5 like it was part of her skeleton. Barbara knew exactly what my grandmother thought of my parents. She also knew people, including someone at County Dispatch. That mattered because 2 days before the baptism lunch, Barbara called and said, "A woman named Carla Mendoza from Dispatch has agreed to attend after church if Leah invites her as her neighbor." She pulled the archived audio for records release. She can answer basic chain of custody questions if needed. Would she actually come? Your grandmother once helped her fix a property tax error on her mother's house in 1998. The world is small when you're kind to clerks. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and stared at the magnet on my fridge from an urgent care clinic I no longer used. "Thank you," I said. Barbara's voice softened. "June would not have left you without a way through this." I slept almost not at all the night before the baptism. Not from fear. Not the panicked kind, the focused kind. I packed a slim black folder with the audio transcript. The dispatch summary, the text screenshot from 10:22 a.m., the work time card, and a still shot from the church hallway, camera time stamped 12:51 p.m. showing me carrying the baked ziti dish. I wore a blue dress my grandmother bought me 2 summers earlier at Dillard's because she said it made me look like someone who gets things signed correctly. At the church, the sanctuary air conditioning was too cold and smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and hymnals. Harper wore a white dress with tiny pearl buttons. My mother kissed her cheek for the cameras and kept glancing toward me with that same composed face she had worn at the funeral, like she was hosting her own innocence. Lunch started at 12:20, 41 people in the fellowship hall this time. I counted because numbers calm me. Leah had seated me at a round table near the windows, 2 tables away from my parents. Carla Mendoza arrived at 12:36, wearing a pale green blouse and carrying a tote bag with the county seal on the side. If you looked quickly, she was just another woman stopping by after church. If you looked longer, you saw the keycard clipped to her purse and the habit of someone who is used to saying exactly what a record says and nothing more. Leah introduced her as my neighbor Carla from over on Delaware Avenue, which was true. Then Barbara guided her to our table and sat her directly across from my mother. My father noticed first. His face changed by less than an inch. That is how I knew we were close. I did not make an announcement. I did not ask for quiet. I waited until people were halfway through cake and coffee, when rooms get lazy and guard drops. Then I stood, walked the 8 steps to my mother's table, and set the black folder beside her plate. I brought the timeline you said didn't exist, I said. My mother's hand stopped on her fork. She looked at the folder, then at me. This is not the time. It is a very good time. My father rose halfway out of his chair. Megan. I turned to Carla, who had already opened her tote and taken out an envelope. Ms. Mendoza, I said, would you mind confirming the one question my parents have been repeating since March? The room went quiet in pieces. Not all at once. First Leah stopped speaking, then Barbara, then Denise. Then the children got shushed. I heard the ice machine in the kitchen dump a tray. I heard someone set down a coffee cup too hard. Carla took out a typed page and adjusted her glasses. She did not know my family. That was the beauty of it. She was not there to vindicate me. She was there to answer a records question. I'm a dispatch supervisor with Greene County Emergency Communications, she said, and now every face in that room was turned toward her. I reviewed the archived call from March 8, 2024, placed by Dana Rowan at 2:14 p.m. regarding Megan Rowan. My mother went very still. Carla looked at the page. During that call, the dispatcher asked whether the reporting party had any contact from Megan in the previous 4 days. The reporting party answered, quote, "No, none, silence." Then Carla added, in the same neutral tone, "Attached to the release packet are same-day records provided by Megan Rowan, showing direct text contact at 10:22 a.m., employer verification of in-person work attendance ending at 12:01 p.m., and an officer clearance at 8:42 p.m. confirming she was safe and not impaired." No one moved. My father sat down slowly. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, and said, "That is not what I meant." It was the only sentence she managed. Carla, who had likely heard every possible variation of panic from strangers on the worst days of their lives, just folded the paper once and placed it back in the envelope. "I cannot speak to what anyone meant," she said, "only to what was recorded." Then she stood, nodded to Leah, and left the room with the same calm she had entered with. That was the moment. Not when I spoke, not when I set the folder down. When a woman with county credentials and no stake in my family said one plain sentence in a room full of casseroles and church cake. If you have ever waited months for the truth to become heavier than the performance, you know the sound a room makes when that finally happens. It is not dramatic, it is smaller. A fork against ceramic. A chair leg dragged backward, someone breathing through their nose because they do not trust themselves to speak. Stay with me, because the consequences came quickly after that, and they were specific. Denise spoke first, of course. "Dana," she said, too bright, "I am sure there is some misunderstanding." Barbara Klein turned to her and said, "There is not." Mrs. Nettles, who had been by the tea urn the day Leah overheard my father in the kitchen, put down her napkin and finally did what decent people do too late. She said, "Paul also said after the funeral that if they delayed the release long enough, Megan would need supervision. I heard him." My father looked at her like he had never expected her to become solid. Leah added, I heard it too. Two witnesses, same sentence, same room, same goal. My brother Evan stood by the drink table holding a foam cup and staring at my parents like he had misplaced his own childhood. He did not say anything then. He texted me that night and asked for the report. I sent it. My mother did not cry. She did not apologize. She said, This is deeply inappropriate. I said, So was filing me as missing while I was texting you. Again, I kept my voice even. I had learned by then that calm makes liars feel naked. Gerald Finch was not at the lunch, but by 3:10 that afternoon he had left me a voicemail. Megan, I have now received a copy of the dispatch release and the stewardship draft your father sent. I will be noting in the estate file that prior interference claims by your parents were unsupported by records. I also want you to know I will not take instructions from them regarding any matter involving your distribution. Unsupported by records, another clean sentence, another brick. The church fallout started Monday morning. First Baptist had 3 paid office staff and a dozen volunteer roles people treated like inherited titles. My father's favorite of those titles was financial secretary. He handled offering tallies on Mondays and payroll for the music director and custodians. By Wednesday, June 12th, he had been asked by the deacons to step back pending review because concerns had been raised about the use of church equipment and judgment involving false documentation. That was their phrase. He lost the office key and the payroll login the same day. 3 weeks later, the HVAC company where he did part-time bookkeeping let him go after one of the owners, who also attended First Baptist, heard what happened and looked into whether company fax lines had been used to send the note to Gerald. They had. March 8th, 4:43 p.m., 7-page outgoing fax to Gerald Finch's office, cover page from Rowan Heating and Air. My father's name in the header. He did not just lose face, he lost $860 a week and the one role he used to look respectable in town. My mother's price was different and, in some ways, harsher for her. She lost access. To me, obviously, that was immediate and permanent, but also to the money, to the story, to the family members who had once let her narrate every conflict. Aunt Colleen stopped inviting her to planning lunches. Leah stopped letting her pick up Harper from preschool. Barbara Klein told 3 people at the assessor's retirees' luncheon exactly why June had kept copies. Mrs. Nettles refused to sit with her in choir for the rest of the summer, and there was one more concrete consequence. Gerald sent a written notice on June 18th that because of documented interference with a beneficiary distribution, neither Dana Rowan nor Paul Rowan would receive any estate-related records beyond those they were personally entitled to. No account summaries, no correspondence copies, no discussion of my distributions. It sounds small until you know my mother. Access was oxygen to her. She did not just want money, she wanted her hands in every file. I bought a condo in September on East Elm, 12 minutes from my office, with a down payment made entirely from what my grandmother intended for me. $168,000 purchase price, 2-bedroom, 3rd floor, ugly lobby carpet, good light in the kitchen. On closing day, the title company smelled like copier toner and pumpkin spice air freshener, and I signed my name 23 times. Every time I thought of my grandmother teaching me to compare signatures at her dining room table. I paid off my car, I opened a high-yield savings account, I enrolled in prerequisites to apply for dental hygiene school in January. Quiet things, real things. My parents still sent messages for a while. My father on birthdays, my mother on holidays, always with the same smooth wording. I hope time has softened your interpretation of what happened. That one arrived on Thanksgiving at 6:32 p.m. I did not answer. Because here is the part that does not wrap cleanly. Winning did not restore anything. It did not give me different parents. It did not erase the fact that when my grandmother died, the first thing my mother did with her grief was try to build a record against me. It did not erase the officer at my door or my landlord's careful voice or the way half a room of relatives believed her for at least long enough to become quiet. There are people who think justice should feel warm. It didn't. It felt accurate, and accurate was enough. Now let me take you back one last time to my grandmother's kitchen on West Bennett, 2 summers before she died. The window unit was rattling, the room smelled like Folgers and lemon oil, and she was showing me how she filed bank statements by quarter. I had asked her why she kept copies of things everyone else would throw away. She said, because the truth is usually boring before it saves you. That line lived in my head all through March and April and May while I printed screenshots and labeled tabs and sat in cold records offices listening to strangers state facts. My parents hoped no one would ever line up in order. The truth was boring: a text timestamp, a work clock, a dispatch log, a church hallway camera, a fax header, a neutral woman reading one sentence from a typed page. Boring enough to destroy them. I still drive past First Baptist sometimes on my way to Leah's. I still feel something tighten in my shoulders when I see the basement windows. I still have the black folder in a file drawer in my condo office, labeled March 8th. I probably always will. Not because I plan to reopen anything, because I learned what it costs when you assume family means safety. My mother has not said my name in a room I care about since that day. My father found contract bookkeeping work in January, but not at church and not anywhere with keys. He makes less. He complains, according to Evan, that people took one misunderstanding too far. That is the story he can bear. My mother volunteers now at a thrift store on Kansas Expressway on Tuesdays and tells people she and I are taking space. That phrase makes it sound mutual. It is not. She lost the right to define the distance. As for me, I finished my first semester prerequisites with 2 A's and a B+, and Olive likes the condo windows because they get morning sun. I keep my grandmother's navy binder on the top shelf of my hall closet. Sometimes I take it down just to feel the tabs under my fingers and remind myself that she knew exactly who her daughter was, and exactly what I might need once June Whittaker was no longer in the room to say it first. I do not forgive my parents. Not in the clean, public way people like to request from daughters. I do not think forgiveness is owed because the evidence won. Some damage stays structural. Some lies change the load-bearing walls of a family. But I sleep in a home they cannot enter. I study for a future they tried to delay. I own the money they tried to supervise. And every important piece of what happened exists in a folder with dates on it. That is not peace. It is better.